The terminal buzzed with the usual cacophony of an airport, muffled announcements, hurried footsteps, and the distant roar of jet engines. The first-class boarding lane was its own microcosm of quiet impatience, a world of pristine carry-ons, tailored suits, and practiced indifference. Standing amidst this was a woman whose every gesture seemed to assert her ownership of this elite space. Her polished demeanor and the sharp click of her heels added an extra layer of gravitas to her presence. She exuded a kind of silent entitlement that told everyone around her that she belonged, without question, in the lap of first-class luxury. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. In the midst of this, a towering figure lumbered toward the gate. It was impossible to ignore him. Clad in his signature oversized jacket, Big Shaq, Michael DePauw's beloved comedic alter ego, moved with a kind of exaggerated swagger that turned heads even in places where celebrity sightings were routine. His energy was magnetic, not because he fit the mold of the polished first-class traveler, but because he smashed it into pieces and walked off with the wreckage. As Big Shaq approached the gate, there was a noticeable shift in the air. A few passengers recognized him, nudging one another with knowing smiles, while others merely registered him as an anomaly. The woman, however, seemed unmoved. Her eyes flitted to him briefly before she resumed her inspection of her pristine boarding pass, as if to reassure herself that this momentary distraction didn't warrant her attention. When the boarding call came, Shaq stepped forward with the unhurried confidence of someone who had earned a spot. But as he approached the queue, the woman cut in front of him, her sharp movements betraying a calculated intent. Her body language conveyed more than words ever could. This was her space, her moment, and he was an interruption. Her hand extended toward the attendant with the efficiency of someone accustomed to first-class travel, and her voice, sharp and clipped, asked if there might be a separate line to avoid delays. Shaq tilted his head slightly, taking in the scene with an exaggerated squint that seemed to mock the gravity of her actions. He didn't speak immediately, choosing instead to let the moment hang, a silence that grew heavier with each passing second. The woman shifted, her shoulders straightening under the weight of his unspoken observation. Then, with the comedic timing of a seasoned performer, Shaq broke the silence. What followed was not anger or indignation, but a volley of dry, understated humor. His words weren't loud or confrontational, but they carried a weight that silenced the boarding lane. Each sentence landed like a well-placed jab, delivered with a kind of wit that could disarm even the most self-assured adversary. The woman's composure faltered, her air of certainty crumbling under the force of his understated retort. Shaq didn't stop there. With a deftness that bordered on performance art, he turned to the gate agent and began a mock negotiation, his tone hovering between genuine inquiry and playful banter. He questioned the legitimacy of the woman's interference, drawing comparisons to absurd scenarios that had no place in a first-class boarding lane but suddenly felt hilariously relevant. The tension dissolved into laughter, not just from the gate agent, but from the passengers within earshot. Even the woman couldn't entirely suppress a tight-lipped smile, though it was clear she wasn't enjoying the moment as much as everyone else. What made the scene unforgettable wasn't just Shaq's humor, but the way he carried himself. He never raised his voice, never stooped to pettiness, and yet he managed to shift the power dynamic entirely. The woman, who had initially positioned herself as the arbiter of first-class propriety, was now an unwilling participant in a comedic exchange that highlighted the absurdity of her actions. It wasn't about humiliation or revenge. It was about turning a moment of exclusion into one of inclusion, though not on her terms. As Shaq finally handed his boarding pass to the agent, the room seemed to hold its breath. The attendant, still chuckling, waved him through with a flourish that felt almost celebratory. Shaq turned, gave a slight nod to the onlookers, and disappeared down the jet bridge, his oversized jacket swaying with each step. The woman, now noticeably less rigid, followed shortly after, her earlier confidence replaced by a subdued humility. The scene was a masterclass in human interaction. It wasn't just about a comedian asserting his place in first class. It was about challenging assumptions and diffusing tension with humor. In a space where status and privilege often dictate behavior, Shaq's approach was a reminder that laughter has a way of leveling the playing field. His ability to read the room, to respond without malice, and to transform an awkward encounter into a shared experience spoke volumes about his character. For the onlookers, the moment was more than just a funny anecdote. It was a small but powerful example of how wit and kindness can coexist, even in spaces where competition and entitlement often reign supreme. Shaq's actions resonated because they didn't rely on aggression or ego, but on an innate understanding of human nature. He didn't need to prove his worth. He simply allowed his presence and his humor to do the talking. As the passengers settled into their seats, the incident lingered in the air like the afterglow of a particularly good punchline. People exchanged knowing glances and quiet chuckles, the shared experience binding them in a way that few first-class perks could. Even the woman, who had started the encounter with such unyielding certainty, seemed to carry herself differently as she took her seat. Her posture was less rigid, her movements less rehearsed, as if the moment had granted her a rare glimpse of her own humanity. In the end, it wasn't about who boarded first or who sat where. It was about the power of humor to bridge divides, to turn moments of exclusion into opportunities for connection. Shaq's ability to navigate the encounter with grace and wit was a testament to his comedic instincts and his understanding of what it means to truly connect with others. The event was a fleeting moment, a brief intersection of lives that would soon scatter to different corners of the globe. But for those who witnessed it, it was a story they would carry with them, retelling it with laughter and admiration. In a space where status often overshadows humanity, Big Shaq reminded everyone that the most memorable moments are the ones where we let go of pretense and simply embrace the absurdity of it all. As the plane soared into the sky, the cabin settled into its usual rhythm. Passengers tucked into their newspapers, adjusted headphones, or debated over menu options. Yet the earlier encounter lingered in the air, weaving itself into whispered conversations and knowing smirks exchanged across rows. Even the flight attendants, accustomed to catering to demanding first-class clientele, seemed lighter in their steps, their smiles carrying an unspoken acknowledgement of the moment. Shaq, seated comfortably, became the center of a different kind of attention. Nearby passengers occasionally glanced his way, their expressions a mix of amusement and admiration. His relaxed demeanor stood in stark contrast to the calculated poise often seen in these plush seats. His easygoing charm, so authentically him, had turned an everyday situation into something extraordinary. For the woman, the flight passed with fewer stolen glances than she might have hoped. Whatever initial embarrassment she felt had likely given way to introspection. It wasn't every day someone encountered a personality so disarming, one that could append assumptions and gently demand self-awareness. By the time the flight landed, a small smile crept onto her face. Perhaps she realized that sometimes it's the unexpected disruptions that remind us to laugh at ourselves and lighten the weight of the worlds we carry. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.